In the Song of Ice and Fire, magical beasts are not an uncommon occurrence. Dragons, direwolves, basilisks, and wyverns occupy different corners of the world, and each play into our epic story in unique ways. Among the lesser-known mythical beasts are the unicorns, which are in fact present in ASOIAF, as Martin himself has confirmed their coming appearance in the Winds of Winter. However, the unicorns of the song are much different than the unicorns from other fantasy stories, so forget your mental images of majestic horses, bright colors, and rainbows. These unicorns are much closer to shaggy wild goats that dwell in cold climates and high mountains, able to keep their balance on the steepest of cliffs. In fact, they appear to be influenced by the real-world Siberian unicorn, a creature which went extinct about 4,000 years ago. They are uncharacteristically ugly and massive, with the iconic singular horn used for self-defense or combat when in battle. We actually see unicorns in two separate visions in ASOIAF, once by Daenerys and once by Jon. Dany's vision is during the final chapter of A Game of Thrones, during her climactic decision to enter Drogo's pyre. Upon entering the fire, Dany sees fire lions, serpents, unicorns, fish, foxes, wolves, and many other flora and fauna, which are described as being remarkably beautiful. It is not clear if Dany is delirious, as she is literally walking into a fire, Martin is just throwing together a bunch of magical hoo-ha to set the scene, or this vision actually means something. There are various possible interpretations for this vision, but most people seem to think that all these symbols line up with the coat of arms of various major houses of Westeros. However, the unicorn does not fit this bill, as it is only used in 4 very small Westerosi houses, and none of these could really be relevant to a Targaryen invasion. Some argue that maybe this unicorn symbolizes the Skagosi playing a major role in the coming Dance of the Dragons, but again, this seems unlikely as the Skagosi lack any reason to join a greater Westerosi fight. The unicorn Dany sees is described as being made of pale blue flame, and a minute later Dany notices a great grey stallion with a blue flaming mane. This is her projection of Drogo, as she calls it her sun and stars. Perhaps this similarity means that the unicorn is Dany's self-projection or one of Drogo's loyal allies, as the blue flame link does seem deliberate. I find this vision having meaning unlikely, as Dany never once thinks of unicorns again, but it's still fun to keep in mind. I don't really know, this vision is weird and doesn't actually seem to tell us much. Jon's vision of a unicorn is much more enlightening. During Jon's first POV chapter in A Dance with Dragons, he has a vivid wolf dream where he sees his siblings direwolves. As Ghost, he reflects on how there used to be 6 of the wolf siblings, but only 4 remain, and he cannot sense summer. This is because of the wall, which seems to block almost every form of magic, including warging, except for the werewood's ability to form a mental network. This is likely because werewoods are built into the gates of the wall, but I'm getting way off topic here. Jon as Ghost sees Nymeria's wolf pack and notes her leading hundreds of normal wolves that are howling and hunting with her, consuming the flesh of men. He also sees his black cousin, Shaggy Dog, kill what he believes is an enormous goat. Knowing that Rickon and Shaggy Dog are currently on Skagos at this time, this goat is actually a unicorn, and the so-called goat is described as having a singular long horn which it used for self-defense. And the goats that we see in the song are almost all small or used for livestock, not able to injure a wild direwolf in single combat or be considered enormous by an already massive direwolf. Tangentially, it is fun to speculate that direwolves and unicorns may have a rivalry. We've seen a direwolf hunt and kill a unicorn after a violent fight. It makes sense that massive wolves would want to hunt and kill these enormous ungulates, but the unicorns would have the ability to defend themselves quite well. This may be why there are no unicorns in the north, or even north of the wall. The direwolves would have hunted them to extinction. There also appears to be no direwolves on Skagos, but we are yet to see. Again, minor aside that I'm not the first to postulate, but it still is a plausible possibility. So there was already a unicorn in the Song of Ice and Fire. A dead one, but a unicorn nonetheless. The short description we have makes it seem as though the unicorns in this song are feral, rare, and difficult prey. We know from this vision that there was, at least one unicorn on Skagos. In fact, there are a lot more connections between Skagos and unicorns, and the fandom is well aware of this link. Most importantly, in Sam's second Feast for Crows chapter, he recalls reading stories about Skagosi which recount that they lived in caves and were rebellious people, and hearing songs that the Skagosi are cannibals which eat the hearts and livers of those they slay in combat. He also read that the Skagosi rode great shaggy unicorns into war. Sam's knowledge is corroborated by the world of Ice and Fire, which states that the Skagosi ride unicorns into combat and were, and possibly still are, cannibals. Daeron, one of Sam's boatmates, remarks that he would like to see a unicorn as their ship passes by the tall and dark mountains of Skagos. These accounts line up with what Jon's vision has taught us. Unicorns are large, massive, aggressive, and reside on Skagos, particularly in the higher mountains. Additionally, it informs us that these unicorns may be able to be tamed or controlled in some way by the natives of this wild island. Now, though a lot of the fandom ties unicorns to Skagos, many glance over another connection to a similar location, Ibben. In fact, the Skagosi are believed to be descendants or distant relatives of the Ibbenese. The nation of Ibben is comprised of various small islands in the Shivering Sea, including Ib, which is the second largest island in the known ASOIAF world. The Ibbenese are mysterious and ancient, but they are rich on natural resources, particularly in tin and whale remains such as blubber and bones from its flourishing whale trade. Ib, because of its ancient and mythical status, still has wild mammoths, as well as several reports of unicorns in the higher mountains. Additionally, an ancient and now extinct race called the Hairy Men, a race of ferocious warriors the Andals may have fled when sailing towards Westeros, also rode into battle on unicorns. The Hairy Men are quite similar to the Ibbenese, and thought to be their ancestors as well. We know, however, that unicorns are scarce, as we never actually see any directly, and most of the world seems to be skeptical of their existence. Bloodraven himself states that among other mystical creatures, unicorns are nearly extinct and will be the next to disappear, as the mammoths are down to the hundreds and the direwolves, though more numerous, will die out as well. This quote is interesting as it implies there may only be a few dozen unicorns left in the world, if the unicorns number less than the mere hundreds of mammoths. Additionally, unicorn horns show up throughout the world of Ice and Fire. The Maesters initially thought all these to be fraudulent narwhal horns hunted and deceptively sold by the Ibbenese, and many in fact are, but select horns from Skagos were undeniably different and unique. And accounts of sailors and maesters in Eastwatch seeing Skagosi riding massive hairy beasts with a single horn, beasts that could climb rocky cliffs, eventually led the maesters to confront the reality of unicorns. Unicorn horns are understandably thus very rare and valuable, and we consequently only see two of them in the entire Song of Ice and Fire. The first is procured by Euron and is one of the many great riches he presents during the King's Moot. The second is tribute given by the wildlings to cross the wall. Interestingly enough, in a very horn-centric chapter, where Jon discusses the Horn of Joramun and how it was burned by Melisandre. Upon seeing the item, Jon internally wonders at its value and thinks it is one of the most expensive items he has ever laid eyes on. Interestingly, House Brax, a minor house loyal to House Lannister, uses a purple unicorn in their house sigil. They show up at various points throughout the story. Braxton retrieved Tyrion from the Mountains of the Moon, Arya notices their banner leaving Harrenhal, and they appear alongside other Lannister escorts throughout the story. However, they do not seem to have any ties to real unicorns, and why they chose a unicorn for their banner is as of yet unknown. House Wideman, from the Vale of Arryn, in addition to tons of other things, also has a unicorn on their coat of arms. And oh my gosh, is this the most complex coat of arms ever, or what? As a side note, this makes me realize that the only device on a house sigil which doesn't have evidence for existing is the griffin, as there is minimal tangential evidence for the existence of other creatures like krakens and mermaids. Oddly enough, this may actually be evidence that griffins were real in the world of Ice and Fire, but I digress. Now, heads up, this next part gets a little weird. I would worry about demonetization, but I'm not even monetized yet because apparently none of you are actually subscribed, so here it goes. Please subscribe, by the way. I have less than 200 subscribers, and it takes nothing for you to push that red button, but it makes such a significant difference to my channel, as each and every subscriber is quite special. Okay, so of all people, we now turn to J.K. Rowling. Rowling has this famous quote about unicorns. The thing about fantasy, there are certain things you just don't do in fantasy. You don't have sex near unicorns. It's an ironclad rule. It's tacky. Now Martin, being the giga troll he is, remarked on this before the release of A Dance with Dragons, thinking it would be funny if you broke the so-called ironclad rule laid out by one of the most successful fantasy authors of all time. So yes, we're getting a sex scene next to a unicorn in The Winds of Winter. And you would be surprised to know, I can hardly believe I'm saying this, that tells us quite a bit somehow. We know that George is not introducing any new POVs, and this, on top of recent comments, confirms that there are future plans for Rickon in the book series, as Davos' coming mission involves Rickon. While there did exist theories that Rickon was already dead or would not leave Skagos, we can disprove these theories on the grounds of unicorn sex, which has to be the most cursed theory in the entirety of A Song of Ice and Fire. Oh my goodness. But wait, there is unfortunately more, really. Unicorn sex also provides final confirmation that Davos will get to Skagos, because again, no new POVs. We know Davos will encounter Osha and Rickon on Skagos. Because there are very few unicorns left, and they are very wild creatures only able to be tamed by the natives, this means that the sex scene will involve at least one Skagosi. Why am I doing this? Point is, unicorn sex also proves that the Skagosi are not all male, which was a theory Citadel Maesters had postulated on, and they are not dying out if they are still copulating. Perhaps they are numerous enough to join the fight and will actually impact northern politics. Skagosi may actually have motive to flee Skagos anyway, as the ocean would likely freeze over that far north, and the others may be able to reach Skagos literally just by walking. I'm not done though, even though I wish I was. Sex scenes do increase a POV's odds of survival. The times POVs have died, they never had a sex scene that chapter, with the exception of Eris Oakheart, who was a one-off, and POVs that died never had a sex scene from their POV earlier within the same book. Unicorn sex tells us that Davos is likely going to survive the winds of winter, implying his ongoing scheme with Rickon may have massive impacts on the fragile political situation in the north, with Stannis and the Northern Conspiracy both coming into play. This is quite interesting to think about, as Davos could easily ignite a northern powder keg by retrieving Rickon. If anything, it hopefully gives him the motivation to return to his family, as we all want a happy ending for Davos. So that's unicorn sex, the worst theory in A Song of Ice and Fire that will almost certainly actually happen. Okay, I'm done for real. Thanks for surviving to the end. If you really like this video, please do comment below. I will be sure to respond. When I first thought about making this video on unicorns and ASOIAF, I thought the video would be shorter and I could finish it in like 3 minutes. Turns out I was very wrong. The more research I did, the more I found, and once I got to the 2300 word mark in the script, I thought it best to stop and split all other ideas off into future videos. Let me know if you liked the video, as I would like to make a complete series on ASOIAF cryptids talking about krakens, mermaids, giants, wyverns, and other legendary creatures which do exist in ASOIAF and will likely play pivotal roles in the coming story, as Martin himself quite enjoys the mystical creatures and adding his own twist to them. Anyway, that's all I had for you today. I hope you enjoyed. Please do take care, and I'd be delighted to see you all next time.